Welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we are going to discuss the module, The Basics of Hume's Epistemology. This module is written by Hume of IIT Bombay. Hume, as we all know, is an empiricist, and empiricists believe that our knowledge is rooted in experience. And it is experience that gives legitimacy and provides ultimate basis for knowledge concerning the world that is given to us in experience. The other important aspect that Hume shared with his contemporaries is that he believed, like Newton and others, that it is possible to have a mechanical theory of the mind, where you could lay bare the nature of mind and the nature of the universe through the mind. But the important aspect of Hume lies in taking to the importance of experience, which made people see that there is a psychologism associated with Hume's epistemology. While it is true that experience is the root and also the domain of our knowledge, Hume divides experience as perception, and then he says that the fundamental unit of mind are not ideas, as is the case in Locke, but they are perceptions. So the mind has the perceptions at its disposal. So perception is a generic term in Hume that includes sensations, mental images, feelings, emotions, thoughts, and ideas. Perception is divided by Hume into two important aspects. One is impression, the other one is ideas. Impressions are awareness through direct experience through senses, and impressions are unmediated. They're very clear and unmediated, they're direct. Okay. Whereas ideas are those that are formed by mind from impressions. So you have impressions which are direct, and ideas are formed by mind through impressions. This is the very important point that we should keep in mind while looking at Hume's epistemology. That there are two ways through which mind forms ideas from impressions. One is through faculty of memory. That I have an impression, and then mind forms an idea of that impression from memory. That yesterday I saw somebody, I have an impression of that person, and today I recollect that person from my memory. So if you ask me, how do I know whom I met yesterday? I will say, I remember. It is through memory that I know that I met this person, and I have an idea of that person. So today I will be talking to somebody whom I met yesterday, and now somebody must ask you, how do you know that person? He is not there in front of you. I can say you that I met him yesterday. I have an idea of him today. Though he is not physically available, I carry an idea of a person whom I met physically yesterday. So that is possible through the faculty of memory. The other important faculty through which ideas are formed by mind is through faculty of imagination. Imagination, unlike memory, generates fresh ideas from previous impressions. That I can see that I met somebody, and now I can imagine as if he can be hero in my play, or he can be hero in my next film. Now, whom I met yesterday was not a hero. He was just a person, but I can imagine that he has the potentiality, or she has the potentiality of becoming a heroine in my play. Now that is possible because of my imagination. Now all this imagination or memory are ultimately rooted in experience. That's the most crucial point in Hume. The impressions that I mentioned to you just now are clear. They are more vivid than ideas. They are more vivid than ideas. In other words, that the meeting her yesterday was more vivid than thinking about her as a possible heroine in my play. Ideas are images of impressions. impressions are primary than ideas in Hume. They are the foundations or the bedrock of our knowledge. Ideas also set limits to our understanding. The impressions are the ones that set limits to our understanding. Impressions are not subjective for Hume, even though he is an empiricist. Impressions are external to mind. They are related to objects that we experience through senses. So after dividing perceptions into impressions and ideas, Hume further divides perceptions into simple and complex. So we have, for instance, now simple perceptions of impression. For instance, there is, I saw a color red, and the color, that red is a perception which is simple and it has no complexity in it. So I saw a color red, and that means there is a simple perception of red. Simple perceptions of ideas are also possible. Like, for instance, I saw something yesterday, a color red, and now today I have an idea of the red. So that's what he calls as simple perceptions of ideas. Likewise, you have complex perceptions of impressions. Like this, I saw a house yesterday, which is what he calls as complex perceptions of impressions. And yesterday, I recollected the house that I saw yesterday, and that's what he calls as the complex perceptions of ideas. Simple ideas correspond to and are dependent on simple impressions. Like, I have an impression of an object, and I form an idea of that object. The idea of an object corresponds to the simple impression I had earlier. However, complex ideas do not fulfill the same conditions. Complex ideas are not merely those that correspond to complex impressions. For instance, I may see a house today, and tomorrow I can think about that house not exactly the way in which I had an impression of that house today. Now I might add something to that house. I can also subtract something from that house, or I might add something that there may be something that can overlap between what I saw yesterday and what can be the idea tomorrow. Or there can be a difference between what I saw, the complex idea that I had yesterday, and then the complex idea that I recollect today. So this variance, however, for Hume must ultimately be rooted either in simple impressions or complex impressions. So you might have ideas which are simple or complex, but they are finally has to be traced to or related to either simple impressions or complex impressions. That's because impressions are the root or the crux of this perception. Thus, imagination and creativity are confined to simple impressions, which are founding blocks of knowledge. That means the scope for imagination, the scope for creativity in Hume is a very restricted scope, because they are finally grounded in impressions, in perceptions. So the faculty of imagination in Hume consists of compounding, the act of compounding, the act of transposing, the act of augmenting, the act of diminishing. Imagination can also generate simple and complex ideas, because that if imagination creates ideas that do not correspond to impressions, then it can give rise to an overpopulation of a domain that doesn't have a referent. And that's what he calls as, this can give rise to nonsensical claims, such as that there is a God. Now, you have no impression of the God. You can have an idea of a God. The question that Hume asks is, how is the idea of a God related to the impression of God? Obviously, it is not related. So he says that the idea of a God is a nonsensical thing, and because that it is related to something that is not rooted in impression. That's the point that he makes. The other important point that Hume sees in the overpopulation of ideas that do not have correspondence to impression is that the moment you come up with an idea that moves away that is not related to impression or perception, that takes you away from the real world. Okay, and it not only takes you away from the real world, it also makes the claim that abstract idea can claim to be, as it is the case in idealism, to be independent of the real. In fact, it might say that the real is unreal, the ideal is, or idea is more real. So Hume is intolerant towards this kind of claim where ideas are not related to or not rooted in impressions. Hume would say that ultimately ideas have to be located or rooted in impressions. Now Hume also talks about how to relate ideas, relation of ideas. The first one that we have to keep in mind in this context is the faculty of imagination is guided by three universal principles. One, the principle of resemblance, the principle of contiguity in space and time, the principle of cause and effect. The interesting point here is that Hume says that it is this relation of ideas that makes translation possible. That ideas in that sense are more universal. Okay, that's because of this universality of these ideas in various kinds of things that we can have the notion of cause and effect, the notion of contiguity in time and space, the principle of resemblances. There are a lot of places where I see an object, I have an impression of the object, but I also have relation of that object with something else. So I don't see object just per se, I also see them in relation to others, and there I find that they may have certain resemblances. The resemblances are the important aspects of the relation of ideas. The other thing is about the principle of contiguity in time and space and cause and effect. Cause and effect plays a very important, he has a very important take on the causal relation, and that is we are not going to cover it in this lesson, but that is a very important relation of ideas. However, ideas are both simple and complex, are capable of coming up with arbitrary kind of combinations. Like, for instance, a resemblances can talk about, like one can, for instance, say that there is a superhuman human being who resembles like God. So now what's happening is that you are generating an idea of God from a superhuman human being, a person who is very extraordinary. So you will say that, now he would say that it is possible the mind does something like that, but you should be very careful that you should not accept something like that. So this is what is called as, there are both complex and simple relations, ideas, which can be generated, but then ultimately they have to be subsumed under the impressions. That's the root point that Hume seems to make. There is also a relation of identity, that something can be identical with something else. Now that relation also has to be finally grounded on impressions. Okay, so they also, relation of space and time also have the similar kind of thing. There is also relations of quantity and number. There is also relations of degree and quality. There is also relation of contrariety. There is also relation of cause and effect. So he points out at this juncture something very, very important. He says that we have two kinds of relations. One is that there are relations of ideas, and then there are matters of fact. In Hume, relations of ideas and matters of facts exhaust our knowledge domain. Okay, now let us look at the nature of, or what is there in this relations of ideas or matters of fact. Before I do that, let me also point out here at the outset that there is something that is very interesting in Hume. Is he, while talking about the impressions, simple impressions or perceptions being very clear and vivid, he does remind us that there is a degree of certainty. There is a degree of certainty. Like, we will understand what he means by degree of certainty, and degree of certainty can vary from context to context. in a situation to situation. In order to make sense of that better, let us look at his famous distinction between relations of ideas and matters of fact. Relations of ideas are those where the idea does not depend upon the external world for its validity. Okay, like for instance, you have 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. Now, I don't have to really go to the external empirical world to ascertain the truth of the statement 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. I know it is self-evidently true. If I know 4, then I know 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. So I don't have to go and look for an evidence of it. So it is certain, and more certain than even 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 is A is A. Now, the predicate is already contained in the subject. If I know the subject, I know the predicate. So that is something like what is later called as analytical statements. Okay. Now, there also can be a statement like all bachelors are unmarried men. Now, you don't have to go into the external world to find out about this validity, though this becomes a very serious problem, later, and this Quine problematized in his famous essay, Two Dogmas of Empiricism. So the relations of ideas are those who do not go into the external world to seek for validity. They are true, independent of the external world. But there are ideas, there are entities that are necessary to validate certain other things. For instance, there are thoughts there are thoughts like the sun will rise tomorrow in the east. Is it certain? Somebody also can say that sun will not rise in the east tomorrow. Okay, both of them can be valid till they are proved to be either true or false. Now, the sun will not rise, the statement that sun will not rise tomorrow becomes invalid after tomorrow sun rise. Okay, till then the statement remains a tenable statement. In other words, it is something that waits for its validity outside the world. So this is what he calls as matters of fact. For instance, I can say that the water is boiling and it has a bearable temperature. The temperature can be of the boiling water can be tolerated. Now, I cannot generalize this statement because this statement depends upon the person who is receiving it. Okay, so there can be various variance in the certainty. Okay, the statement that the water is hot is different from the statement 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. In fact, even 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 is different from A is A. So now you have a gradation of certainty, and that one distinguishing feature of this is those things that are dependent for their truth, the external world, those things that are not dependent on the external world for their truth. This is what he calls as relations of ideas and matters of fact. Okay, both relations of ideas and matters of fact exhaust the knowledge domain. Anything that does not belong to these two domains for Hume is nonsense. Like the example that he gives is the concept of God, the concept of soul are those that do not have reference to the experience. Okay, they do not have impressions. So that the idea of God is not something that is sensible. The idea of God is for him something that is nonsensical. So knowledge, to repeat, knowledge must ultimately be validated by experience in Hume, though there is a degree of certainty about the knowledge of the external world. Now, there is something that we should remember in this context, which is very important in Hume, is though experience has to ultimately verify all our knowledge claims, Hume is quick to remind us that from certain experiences we cannot arrive at general experience. In other words, after experiencing several things, I cannot say I cannot use the word all. Okay, or I cannot use the word no. all and no are universal terms. And he says that particular experiences, however numerous they are, can never allow you to arrive at either the use of all or the use of no. Okay, so he says that these use of these universals are not possible from the experience. In other words, from experience or even particular experiences or numerous experiences, you cannot arrive at universal statements. Experience, though, is the basis of knowledge. For Hume, it is also limits of experience. In other words, since experience is the core, the problem is also there, it is also set the limits to us. Okay, now the point that we should keep in mind here is that while Hume denied the possibility of universals, denied the possibilities of arriving at either all or no from numerous experiences, he did talk about the use of all and no in day-to-day life, and that he says that comes from habit or customs, that people have seen certain things and they are habituated to believe that those things are universal. They will definitely come and they start using the word all, and this all is not validated rationally, is not validated with justification. It just comes out of custom or habit. Now this is the major theory that governs his take on the famous debate between is and ought. Hume says that ought can never be derived from is, because ought demands all. Is particular. Ises may be several, but he says that you can have only is and is and is, but ought cannot be derived from is. So you find that what he says about his epistemology has implications to his moral philosophy. So what is important to remember in this module is Hume is an empiricist, and he believes that perception or experience is at the root of all our knowledge, and he makes a distinction between perceptions and ideas and comes up with different kinds of distinctions. And then in the process he does allow the possibility where both imagination and memory can add something to the simple perceptions, but they are all finally governed by the experience, which is at the core of Hume's epistemology. Thank you.